I originally was just going to talk about the C8, but we're going to go all from there. First off, let's start with the C8. You know how many people keep calling these Camaro lights, or calling the whole car in general, a wannabe Ferrari? I'm about to break it down and make you feel like you're blind. Let's jump right into it. So let's look at the C8's taillights. First, before we talk about the C8's taillights, let's talk about why they were radically redesigned from the C7 onwards. So here's the C7, I own one in real life. Now, if you're a member of the Corvette forum, you'll probably know why people suddenly changed their opinion on the C7 lights in literally 1 year. Everyone used to badmouth it the moment it came out, said they looked like Optimus Prime wannabes and ruined the car, then suddenly silenced, and let me just draw out why. Alright, let's look at these lights. So, what do they look like? I'll tell you what. It's the badge. It has always been the badge. It is a reference to the badge. The lights are not based on Camaro lights, because now let's look at an actual Camaro. Would you look at that? Camaros have what I call a rounded hexagon. You can see that there's 6 main turning points, but they're rounded off. And this is not going to do it justice because my brush is too thick, but you see what I mean. 1, 2, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, rounded hexagon. Rounded hexagon. Back to the C7. Oh, would you look at that? It's not complete even. There's nothing on the top. I don't know where everyone thinks that the Corvette headlights go full circle. Back to the C8 though. Now that we're back on the C8, you'd notice the same trend. They do not wrap around on the top. And not only that, they curve inwards here, more like an Aventador. So it curves inwards to match these curving inwards, so we'll draw that out. Which again is something the Camaro didn't have, because the Camaro would have done this. We'll just draw a hexagon for now. That's what the Camaro's looks like. This one is curving inwards. If it sounds like I'm upset, partially because I am, just because it's car guys that say this. Like, they always take pride in making fun of non-car guys for calling Acura NSXs Ferraris, yet they're calling a Corvette a Ferrari without having the hint of automotive design. Let's do the same test that we did on the C8. Alright, you ready for this? Would you look at this? Is that a familiar shape? That a familiar shape? Because here it is. Here it freaking... This shape particularly. Watch this. Oh wow, would you? It's just angled, obviously. Because if I were to... Hold on, let's rotate this. If I were to just rotate it like this... Oh, would you look at that, guys? Would you look at that? Wow. Wow. Here, look, focus on this shape. Focus really heavily on it. And we'll use lime green. Look at this. Or I shouldn't have drawn over it. And then look at this. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 3 main curves. Not like the Camaro was 6. And it's a reference, yet again, a continuity from the C7. It is a reference to the badge. So from now on, when people say, hey, the C8 Corvette's taillights look like Camaro taillights, tell them to go back to primary school. Go back and see their old freaking art teacher from 6th grade. Just kidding, don't actually do that. You'll probably be called a freaking pedophile if you go back to an elementary school campus. But the point I'm saying is, this is so elementary. This is such a basic human insight. This is a complete polygon that the Camaro has. It's a hexagon, it's just rounded off. Whereas the Corvette is not a complete polygon. It is actually unfinished on the top as well as on the rear. And on the rear, it curves inwards as opposed to the Camaro where it curved outwards. Now, okay, I didn't mean to click this, but now that we're on it, ooh, would you look at this? It's a Ferrari. And guess what? I'm a huge fan of Ferrari, but unfortunately, since Pininfarina hasn't been around, I think their design has gone a bit downhill, and I'll hang you with that thought, because now we'll finish one last thing just to prove how effort Corvette owners put in their design. Look at the diffuser, by the way. Look at its shape. Just really focus on its shape. Did you notice something? It's this flipped upside down. Don't you ever say that modern supercars all look the same. The designers that cars put into, like, the amount of work that car designers put into designing cars, they're modern day artists. There's a reason why cars fetch such high prices, because people do buy them for artwork sometimes. Even something as generic as a Corvette is becoming a work of art. It's very, very well thought out. The C8, while I'm not a total fan of it, I've grown to come around a little bit, especially with the wide body, and I'll explain that later in the video. So we're done on this part for the C8. Now let's talk about the Camaro and Ferrari. Would you look at that? Alright, ready? You ready for this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a rounded hexagon, like a Camaro light. Just a little bit less aggressive of one. So where the Camaro was like this one, the Ferrari is more like this. So it's not as like angular. Yeah, it's not as angular as you can see. Especially this one. This one is really angular if we draw it out. It's a lot softer. So if we draw it out, look at how soft that is. But same principle. So let's finish it off. Round hexagon. Now let's finish the Camaros off right next to it. This is what the Camaros look like. Guys, got news for you, but the Ferrari has Camaro lights. Not the Corvette, but the Ferrari. The Ferrari has Camaro lights. The Ferrari has... You get the point. Let it sink in. Now, is it exactly like the Camaro? Of course not. Is the hexagon owned by any company? No. It's the same reason that if I were to pull up a bunch of classic cars, they all used very similar taillights. And like a lot of like for example, Corvettes used to use round taillights, and the 4GT is a round taillight. Does that mean the 4GT is copying? No. Round taillights, hexagon taillight, and if we look at older Ferraris, they've also all had round taillights. So it's the hexagon, for the same reason of the circle, can't be owned by one single company. So you know what? I'm not gonna say the Ferrari is copying the Camaro because the hexagon is such a generic shape. But what we did learn for sure is that the Corvette is not copying the Camaro. That is such a vastly different shape with only 3 main sides to it, as if you actually look at the taillights, because these parts, this isn't illuminated, that's not illuminated, therefore that's not considered part of the taillight infrastructure. So the actual taillight infrastructure has 3 main sides to it as opposed to the Camaro 6. That's half the sides, and they aren't even traveling the same, whereas this one, it has an in-bent this way, whereas the Camaro's an outwards bent one. And now, here, let's go to my favorite part. Everyone always says that the modern Corvette looks like older 2000 Ferraris. Something like possibly an F430. So I have an F430. And if you couldn't tell, they don't look alike. I purposely picked red just to see how many people go so much based on colors and not the intuition of the actual curves of the car. Chances are a lot of people do. A lot of people are really fooled by color play, but I'm gonna try my best to untrain you from that. So the Corvette's signature design we'll start off with. So it's basically like a giant downturned arrow. In Gran Turismo 2, if you drove against a C5 head-on that was lowered all the way, you could actually ramp off it, which me and my friends would do all the time as kids, because the Corvette was quite literally a driving ramp. And another thing that goes with this is the Corvette has sides you can actually count. It's angular, much like a Lambo. It is actually probably better to compare a Corvette to a Lambo in design because it's angular like it. Look at how ridiculously angular everything is. They're all like actual they're like hard-edged polygons. They're not like rounded off things. Like, as much as I hate the side vent, it's proving my point. The taillights prove it. Even this proves it. It's a very jagged car. You can count the sides is what I'm saying. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Whereas on curved structures, there's an infinite amount of, and that's why curved is harder to work with, and that is why Ferrari is still considered, I guess, more handcrafted and more artistic. So let's look at this said Ferrari. Look at this gentle curve, to this gentle curve, to this roof line's gentle curve, to this gentle curve. Wow, and then look at its rear, curvy. Wow. Wow, guys, look, and then this is probably the most angular thing on the car, but even that is at a curve. So it's very much at a, this is also at a curve. Look, it goes, woo, and its front vents are also at a curve. It curves back down. It doesn't have like this imposing ramp-like stance that the Corvette does. It's just a slightly downwards. And that stance is so signature Corvette, because now let's literally look at every Corvette from the C2 onwards. They all have it. And then the C2. So the C1 does not have it, but every Corvette has this stance from the C2 onwards. And better look, watch. Again, stance like a ramp. And then here's a side-by-side of both the cars. Stance like a ramp, stance like a ramp. The Corvette is just always ramp shape. Another cool thing about the Corvette through the years is take a look at this line. It's basically uninterrupted if you don't count the fender, so these wells obviously interrupt it. And the C7 also has one that starts from here. Now this line is signature Corvette. Not a single one of you European fanboys do not try to say you guys own this line. This is something us some proud Americans have been doing on our Corvettes literally since the C2 generation, all the way back when. The amount of people say that the Corvette is just lazy Americans copying European design, I don't want to hear it. I'm very patriotic, very proud of my country. Don't you discredit our artists like that. This is from the C2. We have consistency here in America, gosh darn it. Whereas the Ferrari will constantly change for the sake of trends, which we'll discuss later with the wedge shape to now how they're curved, the Corvette has maintained very consistent things. First off, it's always been angular in design. Secondly, it's always had the slope or the ramp look, so slope / ramp look. And finally, it has always had this body line that is stretched all the way across the car. On every single generation of Corvette, this body line exists somewhere. You can see it on the C4, you can see it on the C5, I already showed it to you on the C6 and C7, you can see it on the C3, and you can see it on the C2. That is a uniquely Corvette feature that when people look at old C2s, even the most intense Euro snobs will look at this car, they'll be like, damn, now that's a work of automotive history right there. This is a very beautiful car, and it's held on a pedestal for the right reasons. This is a car that started a lot of things. It started the slant design of the Corvette, it started the all-around line of the Corvette, it also started the performance lineup of the Corvette, because the C1 admittedly was a 2-speed with the 2-speed automatic with the inline 6, blue flame. It was a slow crap car. This was the big boy V8. Obviously the late gen C1s had big boy V8s, but this one, combined with the aerodynamics, combined with the sexy styling, and really just something that wasn't part spin GM anymore. Zora really brought the Corvette to life, which is why people hail him as the grandfather of the Corvette, because this car has come so far from what people just discredit the Corvette a lot. And now we'll speak of like old retro supercars. So a lot of people say all modern supercars look the same. So before you think I'm just gonna spend this whole video bashing Ferrari, I'm actually gonna come to their defense somewhat, as well as Lamborghini and everyone else. So